we don't do a lot of ultra modern projects. So in turn, when we go to pitch those, when I flip through our photo deck, it doesn't look like the modern homes because we don't do modern homes. We typically do more traditional classic homes. At what point, for example, my company, do we generate some photography that shows a beautiful theater in a white box that appeals to the younger, kind of yuppie population that wants that ultra modern thing as a sales tool? Because there's no difference in us doing that in a traditional home versus a modern home.
Well, there's been stock photography for a very long time. So you could make an argument that you're using stock photography. I don't think the AI concept comes into play necessarily in marketing and advertising, as long as you want to be as truthful as you can in advertising. I mean, people, you could write a little tagline, not an actual home. I don't know. There's ways to do that.
Yeah, that's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that? Ah!
Expo recap, AI tools for your business, and D-Tools has a mid-year report. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 399, Who's a Good Actor? Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Bob Archer. He is the senior editor over at CE Pro. How you doing, Bob?
Awesome. And you, Matt?
I'm doing fantastic, especially because my Cowboys beat your Patriots. Then, see, and the key there is you don't give them time to respond. Then we've got my good friend, Avi Rosenthal. He's a partner at bluesalve. How you doing, Avi?
I'm doing well, even though most people say it bluesalve, but that's okay. I'll take it any way it comes, as long as you don't call me late for dinner. You can call me anything you want. My Giants are not doing much better either, although, tonight.
They should be.
They should be. That's why tonight, Seattle could be fun. Now, I just gave away when we record this, but
everybody knows it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, but I'm glad to be here, still in the afterglow of the CEDIA show. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful event.
Because that's the first story we're going to talk about. This comes to us from CE Pro, CEDIA Expo and Commercial Integrator Expo. Attendance has clocked in at around 13,000 for Denver last month, including all three of us. Read through the article again here from our good friend Arlen. Covers the show, kind of an overview in detail, including the registered and verified attendance, which was a 7.6 increase from last year's event. Obviously, CIX was a nice little addition to this. Bob, let me start with you on this story here. I was there for 2.5 days, I think. It seemed to be very successful. Everywhere I looked, there was people everywhere, which gave me pause when I walked in the door, having not been in a big event for quite a while. There was a lot of people there.
Super spreader.
Yeah. The numbers looked really good. The vibe on the floor was fantastic. Was the numbers bump? Do you attribute that to excitement for the show? Do you attribute that to, still the aftermath of COVID a little bit, the addition of the CIX, or was it just a great, increase in people wanting to get together? And of course, Denver's never a bad place to do that in.
I think it's a couple of things, Matt. First, for whatever reason, and this baffles me, especially as a Boston guy, but for whatever reason, people love Denver, and I can't explain it, but
I don't get it either.
That's Klondike 5. Just write your letters to care of.
But yeah, for whatever reason, people love Denver, and I suppose it makes sense. It's a fairly easy commute to whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast or Midwest. But I think what it really means is, or what all those numbers mean, putting the Commercial Integrator Expo aside, is that people, through the pandemic really took stock in what a live trade event means. I remember the first few months of COVID, people were saying, "Oh, we don't need trade events," and then, as we got into the fall and CEDIA season, people were like, "You know what? Maybe we do need them." And the last 2 years, I think, have affirmed the fact that we do need these in-person trade events. Aside from the social stuff of meeting people you only see once or twice a year, but it's getting that industry education, it's seeing the products in person. It's all those ancillary activities that come with the expo, and people really now appreciate that, where maybe prior to the pandemic, they hadn't.
Yeah, that's a great point. Avi, they seem very excited as far as Emerald. Jason DeGraw said that they've already got 85% of that exhibitor space for 2024 rebooked from existing exhibitors, which is, I will say, kind of fairly normal. How much of this, or is there a large portion of this that is based on CIX? Right? Was that a footnote? What do they have to do to make that aspect of the show? Because Emerald is pushing it hard, and I get it. What is it going to take to make that a successful aspect opposed to a bonus?
So let me put it to you this way. I don't think our friends at Avixia have too much to worry about in the short term. There was a little bit of contention about bringing commercial into this show. There was, and I did walk the CI section, the CX side, just to see it. The booths there were fairly small and sparse. There was some interesting product, but again, I think right now it's definitely a footnote. I think it was an experiment. It really depends on how dedicated Emerald wants to be to the space. Are they going to go out and market it successfully? Are they going to go out and really push it hard? I think the fact that the show was as busy as it was has more to do with the fact that the industry is doing well, and that the numbers are up, and that people are excited about being in the industry, rather than separating it out between residential and commercial. I think Denver is definitely a destination. Dallas was a destination. I mean, even Indianapolis was a destination. I have no qualms about either one of them, but I will say that the excitement on the show floor, there were some exciting things. There were some new product that people were really looking forward to seeing, and it all goes back to the touch and feel. We work in a business. It's all about sight and sound and expression and emotion. It's really hard to do that via a Zoom call. And so, you can't interview a speaker. You can't audition a speaker via a Zoom call. And so it's important that we get together and we do these things. And I agree with Bob that the initial knee-jerk reaction was, no, everything is fine virtual. And very quickly people realized, we've got to meet and greet.
So just before we leave this one, is the success of the CIX side, is that squarely in the hands of Emerald? Or do you think that is something that, because the way I view it, and take this with a grain of salt, but like Crestron is very heavy into both residential and commercial. They can service both markets very easily. The push for me is Emerald has to get buy-in from the bigger commercial brands to show up. Like Atlas was there. They had a nice little booth. Again, not a huge booth, a nice little booth. But there were a lot of players that, heck, I use every day in my business on our commercial side that weren't there at all. The majority of the companies that I use every day weren't there at all.
I would make the point that Emerald underplayed the whole CI Resi event on the same soil. And I think for the event to grow, I would like to see, and I say this as a CE Pro employee, and CE Pro, we all know, is owned by Emerald, that I think they need to hammer that point home, that it's the only domestic event where you can see commercial and Resi stuff on the same floor. And if integrators want to save a trip to Europe, I get going to Europe's cool and everything, but maybe not in the middle of winter. But if they want to go to an event and see the latest commercial stuff, which they probably do, where we know that roughly a third to 40% of their business is addressing commercial installs, they should be going to CEDIA Expo and CIX.
But does that only work if the manufacturers are there? Because if I was getting into, and maybe I'm getting too deep into this one, but if I was trying to get into commercial, there was not enough solutions there.
So, no, but it's first year. Yeah.
No, and I get that. I'm just wondering how hard they're going to have to push to get some of the bigger manufacturers on board to show up. And like, yeah, Harman was there, and they have a ton of commercial products. They showed next to nothing. And I get it's primarily a residential show, and I get that we don't maybe need another Infocom per se.
Well, but I think to Bob's point, there's enough integrators out there these days that do both. And so the opportunity exists for them not to have to go to 2 shows. The opportunity exists for them to go to 1 show. But it's definitely a chicken and an egg problem. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. You got to have the manufacturers there to get the crowd, but you got to have the crowd to get the manufacturer. So, to Bob's point, absolutely there's opportunity, and Emerald needs to hammer it home. The question becomes how big an initiative are they going to run with this, and whether or not the manufacturers, because I thought it was very interesting that Crestron only sent their home team, right? Their Resi team.
There were a couple of people, like Hospitality was there.
Yeah, but Hospitality is always there. You know what I'm saying? They sent the normal CEDIA folks to that show. They didn't.
They had 1 or 2 commercial people. But also I won't get into that. DM me if you want that info.
Yeah.
All right. That's a great point. Let's leave that one there. Let's flip into a fun little story on AI. This comes to us from Residential Systems and a good fan of the show, friend of the show as well, Mr. Henry Clifford. 5 AI tools you should be using in your CI business right now. Go read through the article. Henry always has a very pertinent information in everything he writes, and he actually wrote this one. He didn't let AI write it, but he covers a couple of things that you should be looking into using. Firstly, ChatGTP, which should surprise no one, but also ChatGTP plugins like Photorealistic, Midjourney, Chatbase, and Pictory. Go read through the article. It's very interesting what Henry's playing around with. Avi, we were talking ahead of time. These are fantastic tools.
Yeah.
And I, as much as I sometimes sound very anti-AI, I'm not. I'm anti calling things AI that aren't AI.
Yes,
that's
and that's a different problem because everybody does.
That's a whole different conversation. We're not going to get into.
We
today.
do not have time for that.
Not really. How long will it be before these start being used on a regular basis by our industry at the integrator level, opposed to looking at it and go, oh, that's cool, and then just going on with their regular everyday life?
I think that to a certain extent, an argument can be made that they already are. Henry writes a great article, and I always enjoy reading his stuff, and he's got some really great insights in here as to not just what you should use, but how you should be using it, which I think is the important part. What is really the barrier that we're looking at right now is the reliability of some of these tools. It's not so much that they exist. I play with them. My clients play with them. My teammates play with them. It's whether or not they're relevant to our daily life, how they're going to help us, and whether or not we can rely on them to be good actors. Because right now, sometimes you put some stuff in there and let's just say the work product is not up to the same level that you would expect it to be if you did it on your own. So I think we are just scratching the surface here. I mean, we are literally, this is not even, you can't even use the iceberg metaphor yet because there's not even enough peeking up above the water. I mean, we are really, really in early days. 3 to 5 years from now, we are never going to even remember having these conversations because the concept of AI and the concept of digital assistants are going to be so ingrained in our daily lives. It's going to be as if it was always there. And I think that's really where it's headed. But the integrators, like every industry on the planet, shouldn't ignore it. And that's why Henry wrote a really great article about, hey, these are the things that you can start to do now to get yourself used to doing it. I mean, look, I'm in technology, but I got a lot of muscle memory when it comes to the technology that I use and the technology that I interact with. I have to change things that I'm doing in my daily life in order to make sure that I am able to keep up. I look at my kids, that generation. I've got a millennial and 2 Gen Zs, and they are using Chat GPT and things like that in school. They're using it in their daily lives. And they're, because of their upbringing in sort of this generational technology stuff, they're much more focused and much more easily adjusted to this new stuff. Integrators have always been a little cautious, right? You know, we're always a little conservative about what we do and how we do it. Henry's article goes a long way to help us understand what we should be doing with these tools and why we shouldn't be ignoring them.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, my friend Bob. I saved the annoyingly questionable question for you.
Well, I'll come up with an annoying answer then.
There you go.
You'll be fantastic, I promise. One of the things when I saw this that kind of popped up into my head and gave me a little bit of pause. I remember back in the day when integrators were first starting to add dynamic, imagery to their websites. And then when Instagram popped, and all of a sudden you had a litany of conversations happening in chat groups and forums and all this other jazz about a local integrator who has a competitor who's either using his photography or their photography, or using stock photography to purport that they have built these amazing things that they have never done, or potentially have at least never done, that look as nice as that. It would be like me going in and taking Dennis Erskine's latest theater build and saying, look at what we have done today.
Yeah, but Dennis is a nice enough guy. He'll let you use it.
No, he won't. I've asked.
Poor Dennis, not even here to defend himself.
Not at all. Are we at a point, and because it's a podcast, he'll probably never hear it.
No, I'm going to post it now. Anyway.
Please do. Send it directly to him. Are we at a point where there is concern that, heck, not even just us, but just companies in general are going to use, again, AI photography to generate things to market themselves? It's on the verge of false advertising.
I think we are there, and we as an industry have to be careful of that. There will be competitors out there in any given market. One will play by the rules, so to speak, but the guy down the street may not, and dealers are going to have to deal with that. I would caution people, if they're going to use these tools for their sales and marketing efforts, they need to make sure that these tools are truly up to the task. We're talking not only the legalities in the case of photos, of copyright, and the whole ethical argument of using particular photos, but we're also talking about SEO requirements. If you want to get your business out there, you have to follow the proper SEO guidelines, which is a moving target that Google, we all know Google dictates all of that stuff. And if this AI isn't following Google's latest algorithms, what good's it going to do you? You've got to vet these tools. You got to make sure that they're accurate, they're reliable. We're a long ways off from all of that right now. I think it's good to keep an eye on that stuff, but dealers need to be very cautionary before they step into purchasing these tools and using them to help their businesses.
Is there a point where, and I'll give you an example from our company, we don't do a lot of ultra-modern projects. We just don't. Our clientele is not buying the white painted drywall box. Mm-hmm. So in turn, when we go to pitch those, when I flip through our photo deck, it doesn't look like the modern homes because we don't do modern homes. We typically do more traditional classic homes. Mm-hmm. At what point do, for example, my company, do we generate some photography that shows a beautiful theater in a white box that appeals to the younger, kind of yuppie population that wants that ultra modern thing as a sales tool? Because there's no difference in us doing that in a traditional home versus a modern home. other than we just haven't done it. So to get our foot in the door, is there an issue with that?
Well, there's been stock photography for a very long time. So you could make an argument that you're using stock photography. I don't think the AI concept comes into play necessarily in marketing and advertising, as long as you want to be as truthful as you can in advertising. I mean, people, you could write a little tagline, not an actual home. I don't know. There's ways to do that. But I think to your point, I think it's more than just, I want to branch out. I want to do things that maybe I don't have photography of my own work doing. I think it's more along the lines of, when I ask ChatGPT to write copy for me, right, or write a marketing statement for me, it's very easy because it's hyperbole and everybody understands it's marketing. And so if the ChatGPT goes, a little south on you, you can bring it back. I think where it becomes more salient is things like proposals, for instance. You can't necessarily use it as a proposal tool because there's too much fact and figure that goes into a proposal for an AI to understand the methodologies of your business and be able to produce a proposal.
But if you feed it with proposals that you've currently written,
it's
going to
learn it, and it's going to get better at it. But I think this is where the line is drawn today, is sort of between the concept of creativity and the concept of facts and figures. AI is very good at the creativity part.
I think like anything else, Matt, homeowners are looking for transparency, whether they're remodeling their home or buying a car, like you were talking about, prior to the taping of this. You want honesty with all of this. And if you show a client a Crestron lighting install, and you tell the client this is a Crestron lighting install, I think they're fine with that. But if they perceive that you're misrepresenting that install, that's when I think the client's going to say, whoa, maybe I can't trust this guy.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let's hit one last story real quickly before we leave. This comes to us from Residential Tech Today. D-Tools has published their 2023 mid-year market health report. Go read through it. It's full of a bunch of really interesting information there. Bob, was there anything in this report that kind of came off as surprising to you? Or is this kind of where we expected the market to be?
No, I think this is about accurate. I recall several months ago, I visited a dealer in New Hampshire, and he was talking about, and I asked him, his specialty is like audiophile audio products. And he does all the other stuff too, but he's an audiophile at heart. And I was asking him how the sales period and this year was going compared to last year. And he was like, last year or the last couple of years, because of the pandemic, were outliers because people were stuck at home. Sales were through the roof. So naturally, this year sales are down. So it wouldn't be reasonable to compare the current numbers to the last couple of years because it's apples and oranges. And I think that's where we need to look at these numbers. Yes, the numbers are down in that article from D-Tools, but maybe if you compare them to 2019, maybe it may be more in line with how the market really is.
Yeah, and this is reflected, Matt, in all over Wall Street, right? I mean, there's the anomalies of the pandemic are somewhat taken into account sometimes. I read various reports about import-export and shipping costs and things like that. The truth of the matter is most of these guys these days at least have gotten smart enough that they are comparing against 2018 and 2019, and they're sort of skipping the whole pandemic era. The same can be said for this D-Tools report. That was the thing that stuck out to me, was that they say it's a 5.2% decrease year over year, but they don't tell you what it was in 18, 19, or 20.
Yeah. Did you find it surprising, Avi, the most often installed products were electrical based?
No, because we, again, taking into account what happened during the pandemic, most of your low voltage, you upgraded your networking, you upgraded your control, you upgraded the creature comforts of your home. So the fact that now it's electrical, I think is, again, it could be attributed to just an anomaly, right? 5 out of the 6 months were lighting.
Yeah.
Could just be an anomaly, or could be attributed to the fact that, Netgear had their best year ever, right, in 22. So, everybody bought really great networking gear. So now they're looking, all right, so now I got all this bandwidth. What am I going to do with it, right? This is the fun part. But I also think it's that bullwhip effect of what's available. Networking gear was in scarce supply. Lighting control systems were even in more scarce supply during the pandemic. The supply chain hit the electrical side much harder. And so now things are completely available. And so people are making those purchases. What's more interesting to me is the next 6 months, because now everybody's back from vacation. Because let's face it, everybody knows that everybody took a vacation this past summer. Doesn't matter where you went, but you went somewhere. Now you're home. We have a second Prime Day coming up. People are going to get used to buying again. Right. I was at the CTA last week. They're predicting a very successful holiday season for 2023. Based on everything that they have heard, the supply chain issues are pretty much behind us at this point. As a matter of fact, televisions, there's a glut of televisions on the market right now. So now's the time to buy all your TVs. But the next 6 months are going to be very telling as to where things start to settle out. And that was a lot of the people I spoke to at CEDIA are readjusting their businesses again. They're over the real busy time of the pandemic. They've gotten through the little bit of the trough that happened in the first half of this year. And now they've sort of settled out and they're back to business.
All right, gentlemen, let's wrap it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Avi, if people want to connect with you, learn more about bluesalve, where can they do that?
You can do that on our website at www.bluesalve.com. But you can also find us on the Facebook and on the LinkedIn and on the Instagram and on the Threads and all of those happy places as well.
Excellent. Thank you, my friend. Mr. Archer, if people want to connect with you, learn more about CE Pro, where can they do that?
They can go to cepro.com, or if they want to see what I'm up to, they can go to Instagram at BA1, the numeral 1, or number 1, BA1 Boston.
Excellent. Thank you both again for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at Matt D. Scott on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days, and most other social platforms other than TikTok. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.